Ladies and gentlemen, what we are seeing unfold over the past week is nothing short of historic. A political and legal drama that reads like a thriller, but it is real, and it involves some of the most powerful names in American politics. I'm talking, of course, about the ongoing revelations surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender whose death in 2019 left behind a tangled web of secrets, scandals, and questions that continue to roil Washington. As of February 2nd and 3rd, 2026, we learned that former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton agreed finally to testify before the House Oversight Committee, the Republican-led panel chaired by Representative James Comer of Kentucky. This isn't just routine congressional procedure. This is a dramatic reversal, a capitulation of sorts, after months of defiance and legal sparring. The Clintons had resisted previous subpoenas, arguing that these requests were politically motivated, designed as part of what they have consistently described as former President Donald Trump's so-called retribution campaign against his political adversaries. Now, here's the context. Their resistance had brought them to the brink of serious consequences. Earlier this year, the committee advanced contempt of Congress resolutions against both Bill and Hillary Clinton. Ignoring a subpoena is not a trivial matter. In some cases, it can trigger criminal referral to the Department of Justice. Faced with that risk, the Clintons ultimately agreed to participate in closed-door depositions. Hillary Clinton is scheduled for February 26, 2026, and Bill Clinton will follow on February 27. While these sessions will be transcribed and filmed, they will not be made public. Despite the Clintons' repeated requests for open hearings, they argued that public proceedings could prevent selective leaks by committee Republicans, a concern not lost on political observers. Meanwhile, Democrats like Representative Robert Garcia of California have pushed for transparency, insisting that the American people have a right to see the testimony in full. But why now? Why this sudden decision to cooperate? The answer lies in the continuing fallout from the massive Department of Justice release of Epstein-related documents beginning in late 2025 and continuing into early 2026. These files, totaling millions of pages, detail Epstein's network of influential contacts, social ties, and financial connections. Importantly, they do not accuse the Clintons of criminal wrongdoing. Bill Clinton, for instance, has been scrutinized for his past flights on Epstein's private plane and social interactions with him, facts already public, but there's no evidence linking him or Hillary to Epstein's criminal activity. Representative Comer has framed this as a victory for accountability, stating bluntly, "No one is above the law." That line, while politically charged, captures the essence of the high-stakes theater unfolding on Capitol Hill. In a deeply polarized era, every action, every deposition, every legal maneuver becomes a spectacle, a message, and a potential political weapon. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Donald Trump. His name appears hundreds of times in the recently released Epstein files, far more than the Clintons. These references range from social ties and shared appearances to unverified tips and news articles Epstein saved. Trump has repeatedly said he cut ties with Epstein long before Epstein's 2008 conviction, and has never been accused of direct involvement in Epstein's crimes. And yet, his association with Epstein remains a lightning rod in public discourse, a touch point that could become even more relevant depending on what emerges from the Clintons' testimony. Some of the files also reveal post-conviction communications involving Trump's inner circle, emails between Epstein and figures like Elon Musk, former advisor Steve Bannon, and former Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. While there's no evidence of wrongdoing by any of these individuals, these connections raise questions and in the public eye create a narrative link that cannot easily be ignored. So why does the Clintons' testimony matter for Trump? Here's the scenario. If new details about Epstein's operations, social circles, or methods emerge, they could indirectly shine a spotlight on Trump. The public remembers that Trump once referred to Epstein as a terrific guy, and social media has been abuzz with questions about why Trump himself has not been subpoenaed, despite his frequent mention in flight logs and DOJ files. Critics on the left argue this is a double standard, pointing to delays in the release of certain documents by Trump's administration, while Democrats frame it as selective oversight aimed at political opponents. This brings us to the political calculus. For Trump, this is not just about the law, it's about perception. Should the Clintons' testimony raise new questions about Epstein's network, it could complicate Trump's messaging about elite accountability, draining the swamp, and his own past associations. Even in a second term, if these documents or testimonies suggest hypocrisy or selective justice, it has the potential to alienate parts of his base or give political opponents talking points. Now, stepping back, let's consider the broader implications. This entire episode underscores the deeply partisan nature of American politics today. Republican lawmakers, led by Comer, frame the Clintons' compliance as a victory for justice, a chance to demonstrate that even the most powerful are accountable. Democrats, meanwhile, argue that the move is purely performative, political theater designed to distract from Trump's own associations with Epstein while reopening wounds for Epstein's victims. Public trust and transparency are also at stake. Closed-door depositions, while legally permissible, invite suspicion, conspiracy theories, and speculation. Social media is already buzzing with calls for full disclosure, subpoenas for additional figures like Trump and even international players like Prince Andrew, and renewed demands for DOJ transparency. Each step in this saga threatens to erode confidence in institutions, particularly if the hearings yield no actionable evidence. Epstein's network spanned politics, business, and even royalty, meaning public scrutiny is not just about curiosity, it's about accountability. Long term, this could lead to more document releases, extended investigations, and potential scrutiny of additional Trump allies or other elite figures. In a post-2024 political landscape, every revelation, every deposition, every leak has the power to influence voter behavior, congressional dynamics, and the framing of power in Washington. And yet, without concrete evidence of criminal wrongdoing, these hearings may ultimately serve more as a political spectacle than a legal watershed. At this moment, the situation is fluid. As we watch the Clintons' deposition dates approach, it's clear that this episode is not just about past scandals. It's about how historical controversies continue to intersect with current political battles, shaping public perception, party strategy, and the ongoing narrative about who is truly accountable in American politics. Ladies and gentlemen, as we turn the spotlight from the Clintons to Donald Trump, the story intensifies. The Epstein saga is not just about historical scandal. It's about the intersection of power, politics, and the law. And at the heart of this is one very prominent name, Donald J. Trump. The documents released by the Department of Justice earlier this year, over 3 million pages in total, have already painted a vivid portrait of Jeffrey Epstein's far-reaching network. And in those documents, Trump's name appears hundreds of times, far more frequently than that of the Clintons. These aren't casual mentions. They include references in news articles Epstein collected, emails between Epstein and his associates, tips compiled by investigators, and flight logs documenting social interactions. Now, let's be clear, Trump has repeatedly stated that he cut ties with Epstein long before Epstein's 2008 conviction. And importantly, he has not been accused of direct involvement in Epstein's criminal activities. But the sheer volume of his mentions in these files, combined with his social ties to Epstein in the 1990s and early 2000s, creates a highly combustible political and legal narrative. Some of the files include post-conviction emails between Epstein and Trump's inner circle, figures like Elon Musk, former advisor Steve Bannon, and Howard Lutnick, who served as Commerce Secretary. None of these individuals have been accused of wrongdoing, but the communications highlight the breadth of Epstein's network and the influential company he kept. And Trump, as a former president, occupies a unique position. Every revelation has instant political implications. So why does this matter? Let's break it down. If the Clintons' depositions uncover new information about Epstein's operations, it could indirectly shine a light on Trump. The files already indicate that Trump socialized with Epstein, attended gatherings, and traveled on Epstein's private jet. Flight logs show multiple trips, documented with precision, placing Trump in Epstein's orbit. And there are photographs, images of Trump at Epstein properties, including his Manhattan townhouse and Palm Beach residence. Legally, this creates a complex environment. While none of these interactions are inherently illegal and Trump has consistently denied any knowledge of Epstein's crimes, the potential for discovery and scrutiny is immense. If he were ever compelled to testify, or if documents were subpoenaed in civil or congressional investigations, Trump would face questions about the nature and extent of his relationship with Epstein, including social interactions, communications, and travel. But this is not just about law, it's about politics. The public perception of these associations is magnified by Trump's own persona. His repeated claims of cutting ties with Epstein early on are now juxtaposed against a mountain of records showing sustained contact over years. Social media discussions, especially on X, formerly Twitter, are rife with speculation. Why hasn't Trump himself been subpoenaed? Why are his records being released differently from others in Epstein's network? Critics call it a double standard, arguing that political favoritism shields him, while allies of the Democratic Party face intense scrutiny. The timing of these revelations is also critical. In January 2026, just days before Trevor Noah's infamous joke at the Grammys, the DOJ released another tranche of Epstein files. The documents highlighted not only Trump's social interactions, but also communications and references involving his circle of advisors. Public discourse immediately erupted. Journalists, analysts, and citizens alike began dissecting every flight log, every email, and every photograph. And in this environment, even a seemingly minor joke or comment, like Noah's, can take on outsized political and legal significance. From a legal standpoint, consider this. Trump's past litigation strategy has often involved aggressive defamation suits. His approach tends to be less about winning in court and more about creating a chilling effect, deterring critics, and controlling narratives. But here's the critical tension. Should Trump push forward in the courts, he risks opening the door to discovery, which could compel him to testify under oath, produce documents, and confront a detailed record of his relationship with Epstein. And make no mistake, those files are exhaustive, meticulously documented, and unavoidably revealing. Political implications are equally significant. Any further scrutiny could complicate Trump's messaging about draining the swamp or holding the elite accountable. His base may push for full transparency, expecting accountability even for him. Yet the optics of ongoing releases and inquiries could be framed as politically selective, feeding narratives of bias and double standards. In a second term, these revelations might not only challenge his image, but also create internal friction within his political coalition, as allies and voters react to perceived hypocrisy. The stakes extend beyond Trump alone. Each document, flight log, and email can ripple across the political landscape. Republican and Democratic strategists alike are watching, analyzing, and preparing for potential narratives. Social media amplifies every detail, often in real time. Every casual reference to Epstein, whether by journalists, commentators, or public figures, becomes a lens through which Trump's history is interpreted, judged, and debated. So let's summarize the key points. Trump's name in the files, hundreds of mentions, social ties, flight logs, and photographs. Post-conviction communications, emails involving Trump's inner circle highlight the network, but do not imply criminal conduct. Legal exposure. While interactions with Epstein are not illegal, potential depositions, subpoenas, or document requests could force Trump to confront detailed records. Political fallout. Public perception, social media discourse, and partisan framing all amplify scrutiny, with potential consequences for Trump's base and future political endeavors. Narrative risk. Any revelations from the Clintons' testimony or ongoing DOJ releases could indirectly spotlight Trump, potentially undermining messaging about elite accountability and transparency. In short, Donald Trump finds himself walking a high-stakes tightrope. On one side, there is the law, meticulous, procedural, and unforgiving in its ability to compel information. On the other, there is politics, perception, narrative, and the court of public opinion, where every interaction is magnified and scrutinized. Missteps here aren't just legal, they're existential in terms of reputation, political capital, and public trust. What makes this story truly compelling is its continuing evolution. As the Clintons' depositions approach, as additional DOJ documents are released, and as public debate intensifies, every revelation could shift the landscape. Trump's name appearing repeatedly in the Epstein files becomes a focal point, not just of legal interest, but of political theater. This is the reality of American power in the 21st century. Historical scandals don't remain in the past. They intersect with today's politics, influence tomorrow's decisions, and captivate a public eager for accountability, drama, and answers. Ladies and gentlemen, as we step back and take the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is far more than a legal tussle or political feud. It is a test of American democracy itself, a collision between public accountability, media responsibility, and the raw power of political influence. The Epstein files, the Clintons' testimony, and Donald Trump's associations with Epstein are more than stories. They are touchpoints that highlight the deep fissures in the political and legal landscape of the United States. Let's start with partisan framing. On the Republican side, this investigation is portrayed as a bold move toward accountability, a chance to demonstrate that even the highest-ranking figures are not beyond the reach of the law. Representative James Comer and other House Republicans have emphasized the mantra, "No one is above the law," positioning the depositions and document releases as a victory for justice. To Republican voters, this signals a rare opportunity. The elite, the powerful, and the politically connected are being held to account. It energizes the base and validates the committee's oversight efforts. Meanwhile, Democrats view this entire episode very differently. For them, the hearings are not about accountability. They are political theater, a mechanism to target rivals while selectively ignoring figures like Donald Trump, whose connections to Epstein have been widely documented. This double standard, as they argue, risks re-traumatizing Epstein's victims and distracts from substantive oversight of the broader network. Social media has been awash with hashtags and threads framing the hearings as revenge politics, and public discourse often mirrors this partisan divide. The media's role cannot be overstated. Journalists are navigating a complex terrain. Millions of pages of Epstein files, highly charged political narratives, and the intense scrutiny of public opinion. Each story, each headline, and each tweet carries consequences. On one hand, the press has a responsibility to report accurately and hold power to account. On the other hand, sensationalism and selective framing risk deepening partisan divides, spreading misinformation, or oversimplifying nuanced legal issues. The public consumes these stories in bite-sized formats on social media, creating a feedback loop where perception often drives outrage more than facts. Transparency, or the lack thereof, is another critical factor. The closed-door depositions of Bill and Hillary Clinton, while legally justified, have fueled conspiracy theories and suspicions of cover-ups. Citizens want to know, what are they hiding? Why not release the full testimonies? Democrats push for openness, arguing that selective leaks from closed sessions create narratives that may distort reality. In contrast, Republicans stress procedural compliance and the avoidance of politically motivated leaks. This tension between transparency and strategic control exemplifies a larger challenge in modern governance: how to balance public accountability with legal process and political strategy. Now, let's consider the implications for Trump and the broader political landscape. His repeated mentions in the Epstein files, combined with the Clinton testimonies, create a highly charged environment where every public statement and past action is scrutinized. Political opponents, legal analysts, and citizens alike are asking hard questions. Why hasn't Trump been subpoenaed? Does the timing of document releases suggest selective enforcement? How will these revelations impact his messaging, his base, and his political ambitions? In short, even if no new charges emerge, the political consequences are real, immediate, and potent. Beyond individual politicians, the Epstein files and ongoing hearings illuminate structural challenges in U.S. politics and law. For example, the weaponization of investigations has become increasingly evident. Litigation, subpoenas, and media campaigns are all tools used to shape narratives, discredit rivals, or mobilize supporters. Former President Trump, as we've seen in previous cases, uses legal threats and defamation suits strategically, not necessarily to win, but to create deterrence and shift public perception. This is not unique to Trump, but it is amplified by his visibility, wealth, and influence. And here's where the First Amendment and free speech considerations enter the discussion. The same legal strategies that aim to suppress criticism, threats of lawsuits, media pressure, and public intimidation can have a chilling effect on journalists, commentators, and even comedians. They self-censor, soften reporting, and avoid hard-hitting investigations for fear of costly litigation. The Supreme Court recognized this decades ago in New York Times versus Sullivan, emphasizing that robust debate, even if critical or imperfect, is essential to democracy. Today, Trump's approach to defamation and political litigation exemplifies this tension, demonstrating how the threat of legal action can influence speech even without a trial. Public trust, ultimately, is on the line. Every move by the DOJ, every deposition, and every document release shapes the narrative about whether institutions function impartially. Closed-door sessions, selective document disclosures, and partisan framing all risk eroding confidence in the justice system. Citizens want accountability, but they also demand fairness. If only some powerful figures are scrutinized while others are shielded, the public perceives a two-tiered system of justice, an outcome that can destabilize faith in democratic governance. Now let's examine the potential long-term consequences. Further DOJ releases. The Epstein files may continue to be released incrementally, exposing additional social connections, communications, or patterns of influence. Each new tranche has the potential to implicate additional Trump allies, elite figures, or political actors, even indirectly. Expanded investigations. Congressional committees and independent watchdogs may pursue new lines of inquiry based on these revelations, increasing pressure on political figures across the spectrum. Election implications. In a post-2024 landscape, These developments may shape voter perceptions, influence turnout, and affect congressional or local races as citizens weigh the actions and associations of high-profile politicians. Media dynamics. The press will continue to play a dual role, informing the public while navigating a hyper-partisan environment. How journalists frame these stories will influence public opinion, political narratives, and even the trajectory of accountability measures. Public accountability and civic engagement. Beyond the politics and legalities, this saga serves as a reminder of the importance of civic vigilance. Citizens must stay informed, demand transparency, and hold leaders accountable, not just for personal behavior, but for the broader consequences of power, influence, and privilege. In conclusion, the Epstein files, the Clintons' testimony, and Donald Trump's documented connections are not isolated incidents. They are threads in a much larger tapestry of influence, politics, and public accountability. This is about more than scandal. It's about how historical wrongs, elite networks, and political strategy intersect with law, media, and democracy. Every deposition, every document release, and every public statement shapes not just the individuals involved, but the broader perception of fairness and justice in America. As this story continues to evolve, one thing is clear. The Epstein saga is far from over. It will continue to challenge the powerful, test the integrity of institutions, and captivate a public demanding answers. For journalists, politicians, and citizens alike, staying informed is not just a choice, it is a responsibility. And in the unfolding drama of law, politics, and power, the stakes have never been higher.